Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. Welcome back to Kiana's show. Ladies and gentlemen, I am recording on my phone again today because, again, I don't have enough space on my SD card. So if the volume sounds a bit strange, it's because I don't have a microphone that is an external microphone that's connected to this phone. And so the volume might sound a little bit different from my original videos. It's also important to state that Irish American cyber hackers have still had access in some capacity to my camera and have hacked into the Wi-Fi, although I had sent my camera down the street for it to get fixed. There's still some activity, which resulted in me purchasing an external light to fix those dark settings. And I have an external light and I played with it uh, and moved it all around the room to find the best lighting. So this will just have to do. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important to state that this video is still it's still in the public's interest because it is talking about intelligence agencies, their predatory behavior, and transnational repression. I speak about transnational repression a lot throughout the content on my channel. And so feel free to look through those videos and to watch the content on transnational repression, because this is what I will be connecting this content on this video to. And in this video, what we will be discussing, or what I will be doing, is analyzing a Black cinema film called Tales from the Hood 2. Now, if you grew up as a Black American, you do remember Tales from the Hood. This was like a cult favorite film in the Black American community. And I would argue that part one is visually better. The cinematography is better in part one than two. Part two is a little bit cheesy and not realistic, and but to its credit, uh, I would argue that Tales from the Hood 2 is definitely there. There is a moral and a greater story from the narrative of Mr. Sims. And that's what we'll be talking about this evening. So pull up a chair, get yourself a coffee, a cafe, a tea, water, whatever you drink, and we are going to be analyzing this film. Before we get into this film, it's important to state that this video is in the public's interest. It is from the perspective of information and educational experience. So it's for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing in this content shall be used as a ground to hate white people or to hate Black people. Nothing in this film should be used nothing in this video should be used to hate any group, no matter where they come from. We are going to be talking about white supremacy in this video. So if white supremacy or critical race theory, if these topics makes you feel uncomfortable, then I would urge you not to watch this film. I keep calling this a film. Watch this live. I would urge you to back away from this, and to reiterate, nothing within this live shall be used as a ruse to issue hate on any group, whether they're white, Black, any group. This is going to be a difficult subject to talk about because it does deal with colonization, post-colonial studies, and racism. And so let's go ahead and get into the discussion. In Tales from the Hood 2, there is a prison operator who has racialized tendencies and proclivities. And his name is Dumb Ass Beach. So that's spelled Dumassbeach. So we'll call him Mr. Beach. And he's hired Mr. Sims to come in, who is a great storyteller, to come in and to provide stories to the AI robot patriot. And so this AI robot patriot learns from firsthand experiences of criminality, as well as learning from secondhand narratives, such as the stories that Mr. Sim would tell. And the AI robot patriot is present to determine whether persons within the community would engage in criminality. So as you can see, it's kind of like a futuristic point to this film. And so he recruits, to reiterate, the great storyteller Mr. Sims to profile specific groups so that they can, unfortunately, so that Mr. Beach can prey on those groups to incarcerate them in his prison system. So we already see that there is a prison industrial complex in the background of the narrative that we're hearing, right? And so in the first story that Mr. Sam tells, he tells the story of white siblings, and they have a black friend who break into the Museum of Negrosity. And the goal of that is to steal a gollywog. Now, the gollywog is a racist caricature of black people because of its jet black skin, because of the eyes that are rimmed in white, the exaggerated pink and sometimes red lips, and the frizzy hair. Now, some would argue that these are characteristics that we have as black people, but what's different about the gollywog is that these are exaggerated features on a doll, and it's used to denigrate black people. And it was also used in minstrel traditions. And if we are going back to that time and period where there were minstrel shows, you had white people that would dress up in blackface to make fun of black people, and that was tied to a very racialized history and an abuse of power, right? And this was used, of course, during the Jim Crow period for entertainment. And during these minstrel shows, it wasn't as if they were laughing at the comedy. Specifically, they were laughing at the caricature that the white performer was putting on about black people. So as we've seen, that there has been some caricatures as of late, such as that done by Erica Kirk, that done by Drewski of Erica Kirk, or this caricature of Erica Kirk. And I think when people look at that, they look at it as, okay, we're laughing at not the skin color or the racist undertones of how that impacts white people. We're laughing at the experiences of what we're seeing in real time about a person who society has determined that they cannot trust, right? And I think that that's what that is about. Now, people could agree or disagree, but that's really not up for debate at this moment. We're speaking just very briefly on that. So, with the first story, Mr. Beach, he does enjoy the story that Mr. Sim provides to him, but he asks for there to be other stories that focus more on a criminal standpoint. And Mr. Sims narrates another story. And the second story includes acts of torture, organized crime, fraud, and violence. And Mr. Beach, he enjoys this story as well, and he states that the Robo Patriot could learn from these incidents. During the interim, I think that Mr. Beach walks away, and then Mr. Sim observes him violating the rights of women within his team, unfortunately. And so there is another story which is the third story that involves the violations of the rights of women. And Mr. Beach enjoys this story as well. But he excuses the actions of the men in that story who violated the rights of women, stating that, quote, boys will be boys, end quote, which is deeply concerning. The last story centers on the 1955 death of Emmett Till, who was brutally beaten and lynched for speaking to a white woman. I think that most of us are familiar with the story of Emmett Till, so we don't need to go into his story in this video, but it is interconnected to this last story that Mr. Sim tells, because there is an interracial couple who is attempting to have a child. So the woman is pregnant, she's white, the man is black. She's attempting to have a baby. And, excuse me, and I think in the past she's had miscarriages because of the racialized history of that town and the choices that were made in that town. And she reveals to her husband, who's a black man named Henry Bradley, excuse me, that she continues to have dreams of Emmett Till, stating that he is unsure, excuse me, that Emmett Till is unsure if they should be able to have a child. And so Councilman Henry Bradley, who is black, is supporting a Republican gubernatorial candidate who is attacking the voting locations in a predominantly black district, impelling those locations to close. This appears to be a foreshadowing of what we are seeing happening in the United States today, where there is gerrymandering happening in the South, and districts that are being rewritten and redrawn, and then the Supreme Court gutting a piece of the gutting a piece of the Voting Rights Act, which was very important to civil rights in the United States of America. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the gubernatorial candidate promised to make Henry mayor if he is governor. So, as we can see, Henry Bradley is on this journey of aligning himself with a person who does have a racialized, racist past, and hoping to benefit from that in some capacity with a mayoral seat, right? And I think what's deeply concerning is that Henry doesn't understand or is failing to acknowledge the implications of his actions. And so during this period of time, his wife continues to have these visions of watching Emmett Till, right? Which is regrettable in the context of this film. And while we're talking about this film, what's deeply concerning is that Henry, in this film, what he does is he sees Emmett, who tells him that he is voting against the interest of his people. So what does he mean by that? So essentially what he means is that Black Americans have fought in the civil rights movement to erect all these protections, and what Emmett appears to be doing, or not Emmett, but what Henry appears to be doing is rolling back those protections, which appears to be deeply concerning to Emmett in this film. So what's very interesting, and I think that if this movie was not science fiction or horror, that it could have been done better, especially the part where Henry is visited by Carol Denise McNair and her friends who were from the Sunday school and were unalived in a war crime in their church. And then he was visited by James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, including Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King. So Henry was visited by all of these historical figures that made sacrifices for Black America. And I think it says a lot about the direction that this film or this story was trying to go with that, right? But still, Henry, what he does is he refuses to change his vote, refusing to respect the sacrifices of those who came before him. To reiterate, Carol Denise McNair and her friends from the Sunday school, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, especially James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. All of those people, their goal was to protect the rights of Black Americans, especially the voting rights of Black Americans. Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, we know that they played a significant role in human rights, civil rights. Martin Luther King, his famous "I Had a Dream" speech, and his article on the right to education. These are important aspects of, I think, the civil rights movement. If Emmett went back in time, and this is what we learn in the story, that if he went back in time and apologized for speaking to the woman, which he never did anything to the woman to violate her rights. I think he only said hello. If he went back in time, right, and apologized for speaking to the woman, living instead of dying, his sacrifice would never occur, resulting in the civil rights movement grinding to a halt. Now, at this time, there is William Colton, which is the gubernatorial candidate, who arrives in an SUV labeled Klan Patrol, and they begin to beat Henry. And Henry decides to change his vote, but Emmett says, you know what, this isn't enough. I think it's too late. And he must make this sacrifice himself, and he must sacrifice with his own life. And he does, and his child lives. And after that, history returns to normal. And what's very interesting, ladies and gentlemen, about this story is that Mr. Beach dislikes the sacrifice story. And I think he dislikes the sacrifice story because of the fact that there was an interracial couple within the story. That's one. There was a white woman who became with child, or who was with child, and was impregnated by a black man and gave birth to an interracial child, right? A biracial child. That was an aspect of that story that Mr. Beach disliked. I think he disliked the figures from the civil rights movement, such as Martin Luther King, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. He disliked the fact that those persons were within the film, what was within the narrative of that story. I think he disliked the civil rights aspect in general about that story, and centering on the actions of those in power, those in the dominant society. And I think that that's what he disliked most about that narrative. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Beach later presents the robot patriot at a press conference, claiming it can predict, and basically this robot patriot can predict who will commit a crime against lawful citizens and those who will possibly engage in criminality. And the robot patriot then analyzes, so of course it first analyzes those who have already committed crimes in the past, and those persons are situated within the audience. After that, the robot patriot analyzes the secondhand stories identifying Beach and his team, who after each story shown themselves to be greedy, racist, and misogynistic. Essentially, the robot patriot identified these persons as threats to national security. And I think that is what we are focusing on here, ladies and gentlemen, because we know that intelligence personnel, cybersecurity personnel, in my own story, I speak about the Police Service of Northern Ireland, male cyber hackers, which could possibly be incels, as well as NISO's Group Limited, which is an intelligence firm located here in Belfast, Northern Ireland, not too far from where I live, probably approximately 20-30 minutes from my home. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think the storytelling of Mr. Sims is quite indicative of what I am seeing about the intelligence firms here in Northern Ireland and observing with Irish American intelligence agencies. For example, Irish American intelligence firms, they have positioned themselves. Before I get into that, I want to elaborate on what I mean by Irish American. Irish American intelligence, this is a portmanteau of Irish intelligence firms and American intelligence firms who are working together to carry out acts of transnational repression. And so what I have observed is that these intelligence firms will, craft these narratives of persons engaging in criminality and some very insidious and heinous stuff as well when they themselves are engaging in that behavior. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the facts, right? Let's look at the facts. Intelligence firms that are primarily dominated by men, there are women within these roles as well, but primarily they're dominated by men. They are, especially those persons that are engaging in character assassinations, smear campaigns, what they are doing is they are looking over several different tactics to bring a person down and to harm their reputation, where they cannot get justice, where they cannot survive in a community, where they're essentially ousted from a community. That's what they're doing. And they are holding on to the most horrific and attempting to attach onto a person some of the most horrific allegations to silence a person's voice. Now, I want you to think about what is the most horrific thing that could bring a person down that they have not done, that could silence their voice. And think about how intelligence agencies are actively putting that onto persons. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think what is regrettable, again, is that intelligence agencies are engaging in this behavior. And it raises a question as to whether the systems that they're using to identify crimes and criminality, it raises a question as to whether those systems should be are reflecting back upon them, right? Let's look at the facts. We had men working in intelligence or cyber hackers that colluded with Takura Makoni to alter a food document, a food voucher document, to bring me under the mental health order of 1986, so that would diminish my credibility as an academic, that would stop me from writing my dissertation on transnational repression. So that's one, right? So what crime is that? That crime is fraud. Second, we have also the Police Service of Northern Ireland, as well as cyber hackers and the Garda Síochána and American intelligence hacking into my phone devices, that have done that for quite some time, in an attempt to not to find information that leads to a threat to national security, not to find information of criminality, but to find blackmail information, to blackmail others, to prevent them from being able to advocate on my behalf. This is a state-created crime, corruption and blackmail. We also have the interference with my 1951 asylum claim. You know, I claimed international protection here in Belfast, and every time I go to the Home Office to hand documents that would support my international protection claim, every time I go to the Home Office, my ability to deliver those documents is being obstructed by security guards and people that are aiding and abetting the officials that are actively partaking in transnational repression. And so, ladies and gentlemen, when we look back at the story that Mr. Sam tells, we see that there is Mr. Beach, who appears to want to catch criminals, right? But he really doesn't want to catch real criminals. He wants to catch this caricature of a criminal. He wants to profile and he wants to profile marginalized communities, Black people. He wants to incarcerate Black people. So it's not really looking at crime from a bird's eye view. It's looking at crime from a worm's eye view. And we learn in this film that Mr. Beach his tendencies and his proclivities are more criminal than anyone that was sitting in that audience. And this is very reflective of the men working in intelligence. These men are engaging in defamation campaigns. These men are engaging in altering documents, which is fraudulent. These men are engaged in intrusive surveillance, sometimes voyeuristic surveillance. I talk about that in a Substack post. It was an assessment that I wrote while I was at Queen's University Belfast. I'll link that in the description box below. These men are what scholars would possibly refer to as cyber psychopathy, suffering from that to some degree. And I would argue that there is this developing a parasocial relationship with their victims. And to reiterate, and I'll link that video in the description box below as well, where victims, they don't believe that they are in a relationship with cyber intelligence agencies or cyber intelligence personnel. This is not a unrequited relationship, right? It's not unrequited love. The victim does not think that this communication with intelligence is oblique. But for the intelligence personnel, they believe, ladies and gentlemen, that they are somehow connected to the persons that they surveil, that they have to continue to surveil their victim, that they must continue to engage in this campaign, this quest for what they believe to be, I would almost argue, a warped understanding of justice. And I think what's deeply concerning is that the intelligence agencies, the intelligent cyber hackers who have parasitically attached themselves to their victims, like a barnacle on a whale, won't let go, because they're feeding off of that person's stories, they're feeding off of that person's life, they're feeding, just like Mr. Sims was, just like Mr. Beach was doing, feeding off of the emotion and the trauma, and feeding off of the persecution and oppression that they have placed onto the victim. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important for you to, if you decide to watch Tales from the Hood 2, I think it's important for you to watch it from that lens, where there is such a historical lens of colonization, post-colonial studies, the subaltern, which of course Derek, or so the subaltern explores people's experience who were subjected to Western colonization. And the subaltern experience is the experience from the below, right? Stories from the below instead of from a Western narrative, right? And on this point, Derek Gregory argues when we're thinking about post-colonial studies, argues that an understanding of colonization or colonialism and its successor projects has to grasp the complicated and fractured histories through which colonialism passes from past into the present. And I think that the last story attempted to do that, although it attempted to do that from a horror standpoint or a fictional standpoint, it touched upon that a bit, right? And I think that if we take away some of the fictional aspects of that story, I really do think that we could see the post-colonial aspect shining through that last story, right? And so, ladies and gentlemen, tell me what you think about this. I am so interested in cinema studies as well as academia, and analyzing things is something that I have attempted to do in university when I was a student at Queen's University. We all know my story and how authority figures had me ousted because I sought to write my dissertation on transnational repression. But I hope that you learned something from this story and this movie. And I know that it felt choppy in some places. It was extemporaneous in some respects. I didn't do a lot of preparation for it. I just remembered the movie from the past and watched just a little bit of the film because I couldn't watch the entire thing. It was so cheesy. But again, the historical aspects are what is important in the story. Connecting that to transnational repression and how intelligence agencies prey on people that are vulnerable and victims is very important in the context, I guess, of transnationalism and in the context of the subaltern voice. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and like and share this live stream. And we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.